Okay, well, hello everyone, and thank you for coming. First session in the morning. It's good to see you all here. My name's Freeman. I'm Director of Design at Brightwave.
My name is Colin Welch. I'm Head of Production at Brightwave.
And today we're going to look at digital business simulations, why you might use them, and we're going to walk you through a couple of examples of our latest work in this area. So first of all, just to get a sense of who's in the room here, could I have a show of hands? So anybody who has already designed and developed a business simulation or is thinking of doing so. Is there anybody? One, two. Nervous, don't want to. Great, thank you. So there's a few people. Well, it is a growing field. So those of you who haven't yet designed one, it's likely that you're going to come into contact with one sooner or later. And during this talk, we'll be looking at why that might be, why they're a really effective way of improving performance. Throughout the history of education and learning, there's always been a recognition that there's a difficulty in moving people from a theoretical understanding of something to actually transferring that into real skills. And in L&D, our purpose is to help people perform better. So our work is only valuable if our people can transfer those skills and transfer the skills into real life and use them. One of the best ways of making that happen is giving people the opportunity to practice in a real context. Oops. And in traditional e-learning, we already use scenarios with decision points. And at Brightwave, what we've been doing is trying to push that further and look at how we can create really immersive solutions with get the learner as close as possible to the kind of behaviors that they have to exercise, the kind of decisions they need to make in their working days. And we've explored this through a number of different ways. We've done branching gamified narratives. We've used interactive video, different sorts of interactive video, spot the mistakes for compliance, but also branching video. And in the last year, we've started doing a number of business simulations where we've taken quite complex financial data, modeling from financial data, and then used that to create a simulation in which you're getting feedback on your decisions and able to see what impact it will have on your business. So what are the benefits of a simulation-based approach? Well, it's a truism that we all learn through our mistakes, and particularly in a vocational arena where the decisions are in complex, dynamic environments under pressure of time and budget. But the beauty of a structured simulation is that, first of all, obviously, you can learn without it impacting on your reputation or that of the business. It also allows you an accelerated experience. So things that happen in the time span of a year can be experienced within minutes. And you have a better transfer of skills because quite often these simulations are around modeling behavior or modeling a financial model. And you're experiencing it from the inside. So it's like the architecture of that model. You're inside it rather than looking out and understanding it theoretically. You're walking your way through that model, through your own decisions. And that means that you retain that information a lot better. It's a very active form of learning. So at this point, you might be thinking, well, it's all about practice. It's just giving you an arena in which to practice. But it isn't just the amount of practice, it's also the quality and the way that practice is designed. Anders Ericsson is, some of you may have heard of him, he's a professor of psychology at Florida State University. 30 years he's been looking at what is required to develop peak performance. He's done a lot of work with, in terms of athletes and music, but also more recently in terms of just how it impacts all of us. You probably have heard of the Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, which talks about the 10,000-year rule. Well, it was based on Ericsson's work. But Gladwell kind of misinterpreted it in a way, because it's not just the amount of time that you put into an exercise. To take the case of elite skaters, the difference between them and average skaters, the elite skaters practice the leaps and jumps that they can't do, whereas the average skater continues to do the things that they're confident about doing. And basically, that's because the natural tendency of the brain is to take repeated behaviors and turn them into a habit. So if you're constantly at work doing the same thing, you're not actually getting any better at it. You need to take yourself out of that habit forming and have a way of getting feedback on what you're doing. And it also means you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone to do things that you are not necessarily that good at. And Anders Ericsson developed the idea of deliberate practice, which is, it's a highly structured way of improving performance. It's the difference between hitting a tennis ball against the wall for hours on end and having a coach that breaks down your serve, pinpoints exactly where you're going wrong, and allows you to practice that subset of the skill, very much like chunking from learning theory, really. So what do we need in terms of deliberate practice? What do we need to put into our simulations to create that? First of all, you have to define very specific goals. It's not the overall practice. Define exactly what you want to improve. Make sure people are getting out of their comfort zone. So things that they're able to do, but almost able to do, but not quite yet. Ericsson's research also showed that one of the best ways to improve performance was to focus on these areas of weakness. And so provide abundant practice in those areas specifically. You also need to be getting feedback, which is the role of the coach in a sort of training situation. And that 10,000-hour rule, you do need time, which is not the great message for L&D, but you do, in order to create excellence, you need time to be practicing those skills. In terms of the different sorts of simulation, some of you will have encountered them. We've done a lot of, obviously at the bottom there, the software simulation. The things that we're going to be talking about today are a sort of combination of the quantitative, so process or resource management type of simulation, and the soft skills, where you're talking about decisions about behavior. And there's also, obviously, the medical flight type simulation. We're always trying to include game elements within our simulations. There are differences between games and simulations, and we could have a long discussion about what those are. But essentially, if you can find that sweet spot between the serious purpose of a simulation and the engagement of a game, you really deliver a very impactful learning experience. And we've seen that in our clients. And I think you'll particularly, when we get to the group game that Colin will show, you'll see that very evidently. So let's move on to two examples of our recent work. These are hot off the press. They're actually, they're work in progress. They're still prototypes, so hopefully they're going to work. The first one is around grocery account management. You probably all know, very competitive field in the grocery sector. Trade customers increasingly sophisticated, so account managers need a very strong blend of planning, negotiation, and commercial skills. So with this simulation, it was to improve the account manager's skills in engineering profit and loss, dealing with the changes in accounts, things that came up that they had to deal with over the progress of a number of months. And we identified with the client the common risks and opportunities within the usual kind of things that generally happen and that people find quite difficult to deliver. Do you want to move? I've got my beautiful assistant to, because we have to come off here and go into the the
I
next
will
one.
say something later as well, but I'm pressing buttons for now.
So we'll move into this simulation. So in this simulation, as the player, you play an account manager for a manufacturer of grocery products. And we've developed 6 little scenarios here. We'll go into the Shop OK one. So in this scenario, in this simulation, you're taken through the structure of your customer account planning. So you have a regular monthly meeting. So each month is like a level in the game. And the situation gets increasingly complex as you go through the number of levels. And each one plays over a different time. This one, I think, is 5 months that it plays over. So there's 5 levels to the game. Yeah, these are just stock images because it's a prototype at this point. So the first thing is to review the data. You'll see that this screen here, initially, we've only got a few things in it. We go into the email, which is telling me that the customer wants to delist 5 of our products. My role in this scenario is to try and persuade him that he should keep as many of those products as possible on his shelves. Okay. So let's go into the choose activities here. And the first thing I think we should do is, you can see there's a number of activities, a whole range, and these change dynamically according to the month you're on. You go into the appointment. Even at the appointment level, there's a number of choices you have here. So there's another level. I think we'll choose the meeting for month 3, give him a bit of time to agree. And we will also, I think, get some more data. So request account history and generate a projection for those promotions. And then apply those choices, and you get a little summary of the things you've decided to do, and then you also get a summary of what's happened in that month. So that's great. The buyer's PA's confirmed the meeting for month 3. So I've got one good thing already done. So we'll go into the next meeting. I think I'll get some information from my colleagues here. So there's other levels of information. In the final version, this will be video. So she's saying, actually, if you look at that account data, it's not as bad as the customer is saying. So let's have a look at that account data. And the beauty of this is you can actually give the learners quite a lot of detailed data. So the kind of data that they would be encountering and having to deal with on a kind of daily basis. So really detailed spreadsheet that they would be used to reading and identifying what's going wrong with those accounts. So now we're back. I can choose some different activities for this. So I think we'll go into the proposal for shelf space. You'll see the choices are actually quite subtle. They're quite challenging. It's not obvious which one you should do. And that is deliberately to push them out of their comfort zone and get them really thinking about what choice they're going to make here. So we'll choose this one here. I think we'll go into promotions, proposals for promotion here. And I think we'll just propose that biscuits innovation. We've got, and then we'll move into the main statement for the presentation. Again, at each level, you've got quite a lot of detailed decisions to make. Okay, we'll apply those choices. So you can see what's happening here. And we'll just go into the next meeting. And at the next meeting, it's month 3. So the only thing I should do here really is meet the client. So let's try and meet the client at their office and see what happens. So sometimes you might choose a lot of different activities. Sometimes you might choose one. It's entirely up to you. Each time you choose, the story changes. The buyer here has decided to delay for another month and is obviously is not quite taken my proposals on. Yep, so let's go into the next meeting, and I might get a bit of feedback from one of my colleagues here. And this is an indication of the kind of the different levels of proficiency that I might have. So I might have done all the right things so far, but I didn't include my colleagues in the decision. I didn't circulate it to them. So although I will have scored quite highly in terms of the actual actions, it allows a kind of subtle inclusion of how much I'm including my colleagues and talking to them. Yeah. So now if we move out of that back to the slide show, so you can see that the interface there is really simple, but the data behind it is quite complex. And in a minute, Colin will take you through in a little bit more detail on the second one, our design and development process for simulations. But just to give you an idea, this is just the decision about when we make the appointment. And you can see there's a number of triggers and dependencies there that will, therefore, the kind of feedback that you're getting is very specific to the actions that you've done within it. When you get to the end of the scenario, you get your score, you get feedback from all your colleagues, as well as seeing what's happened within the scenario. So that's an example of a simulation that's got a narrative structure. And I'm going to hand over to Colin, who's going to show you one which is data-driven.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. So yeah, this is a simulation with quite a different use case from the one Caroline showed. As Caroline mentioned, that was a very story-driven simulation designed to be played by a single player, and you can explore various different options and see lots and lots of different outcomes in that kind of, but still within a sort of narrative. The example I'm going to show you is a team game. So it's a game that's designed to be played with teams who compete against each other. So another client of ours in the retail sector who produce alcoholic beverages. And it's designed to be played at the end of face-to-face training courses, which are around the promotion and pricing of drinks. So the training itself is really kind of quite dense and very theoretical and around sort of promotion and pricing theories. There's a lot of maths in there. So the objectives of this simulation were varied. One was obviously to take all of that theory that people have been learning through the day and put it into practice in a simulated environment. Another was to make that energizing and exciting, and by having a kind of a team game where people are competing against each other, it just gave that extra level of engagement in the room. Obviously, it had to be realistic and nuanced, and that's why our client wanted a simulation rather than just a kind of basic exercise. There's lots and lots of different types of decisions you can make, and then lots of discussion that will be drawn out of the results, which you'll see in a minute when I run the demo. And yeah, so to stimulate that discussion, the facilitator was there to lead the session. You didn't have to have a kind of an absolutely right or wrong way of doing anything. It's just different teams could have tried different strategies and see what the results were and see who did better, and then have a conversation about why that might be. So I'm going to jump out into the demo. So this is what the facilitator would see. As you can see, we've got a couple of teams logged into this game. You can have anything up to sort of 10 teams. Usually we'd have sort of 4 or 5 teams of sort of 3 to 4 people per team. So they'd be making decisions as a team. I'm not going to run a team game here today because I'd need to get lots of other people to log in and do that. But I'm just going to run a little demo to show you what the game is and how it works. So I'm okay for now. I'm going to have to ask Caroline to hold this in a minute because I'm going to need both hands. But the game is set in a bar. Each team the challenge is to bring a new brand of whiskey to market, mid-range sort of whiskey brand, and each team needs to promote that brand and price their drink each month in order to make the most profit. So you can see here we've got $3,000 of budget available. You're against the clock. You can see up in the top left-hand corner there, the time's ticking down, so the teams would be under pressure to have a conversation about the decisions they're going to make, how they're going to invest in their brand. And the profit will rack up on there. So at the moment you have sort of 3 or 4 teams all going for this at once. And then the game is played over 12 rounds. So it simulates, as Caroline mentioned earlier, it's kind of a whole year's worth of sales and promotion strategy condensed into 12 5-minute rounds, which are actually played over 2 6-month rounds over the 2 days of training. So I'm going to get Caroline to hold on to this now, right in front of my chops. And so we can, as you can see, we can choose to invest in different types of point of sale materials. And you can see them appearing on this kind of a 3D bar there. So we can invest in branded menus or glassware, so branded glassware for our drinks brand. We can increase the visibility on the back bar there. So we could get our brand really nice and visible in this bar. as you can see, I can't spend all of my money. I can't invest in everything. I can spend all of my money, but I can only invest in certain things. So as I invest in some things, other things are taken away from me. I could choose to train the bar staff, so to get them kind of more clued up on my drink and how to serve it really well to customers. Or I can invest in a range of promotions. I'm going to go for a happy hour, I think, to see if I can attract some more customers to buying my brand. So teams would debate over this, and obviously a lot of what they've been covering in the face-to-face training would help them to make decisions about what good promotional strategies are. And the key thing for the simulation is that you can kind of adopt different strategies. You can either kind of choose to not really invest very heavily in your brand and just price it very cheaply, or you could go for the more premium end of the market and increase the visibility of your brand and set a higher price. So on the next screen here, you can sort of click back and forth between the two, but once you've decided what to invest in brand-wise, you can price your drink. So anything between sort of $5 sort of bargain basement drink, or right up to sort of $20 for a really high-end cocktail type brand. So I'm going to go kind of mid-range. And then when I hit go, it runs a sort of sped up time lapse of the month. So you can see the time is going to tick away really fast up in the top left-hand corner. You're going to get customers coming into the bar, so you can sort of start to gauge how busy or empty your bar is going to be based on the promotion decisions that you've made. And then at the end of the month, I get a little summary of what's happened, what I did price-wise, and some little feedback. So already my bar staff are starting to get unhappy. That's either because they're being overworked, the lines were too long, or because there was nobody in the bar. But it doesn't tell you exactly what's happening, which is kind of key to the simulation. So I'm going to jump back to the slides. So what you would then see in a team-based game is up on the facilitator screen, you'd be able to start comparing results between teams. So you've got one team that's going to be in the corner going, we're in the lead. And the one key point about this simulation is that after 1 month, you won't really start to see the outputs or real learning points until you're a few months in. Because some of the decisions teams take kind of earlier on in terms of how they invest in their brand will maybe start to come into fruition. So as an example of that, a team might decide to be really short-termist and not spend any of its budget on promoting its drink. And for a couple of months, that might mean that they're more profitable because they haven't invested so heavily. But then later on, you might find that a team that's kind of been building their brand and slowly increasing their price might start to do a lot better. And the facilitator every quarter, so every 3 months, can then bring up team by team, individual teams' data, look at things like the average price they've selected, look at the ways they've chosen to invest their money, and then start to draw out that discussion around why some teams might be more successful than others. So that's the solution. I'm just going to talk very quickly about how we designed it, because it was quite a different design and development process to what you'd apply to a sort of traditional piece of learning content, like a face-to-face course or a piece of e-learning. It was much more like developing a video game. So we started off by wireframing it. We didn't do any kind of graphical UI mock-ups or anything to start with. We just kind of planned out in a series of lots of wireframes how the structure of the game would work, how rounds would work, just to kind of think through the game logic and structure and how teams would play it. So once we'd wireframed it, we then actually got straight into building the data that sits behind the simulation. So everything you just saw on the sort of 3D front end is driven by a really kind of complex and clever real simulation. This was some of the early UI. As you can see, it looks really horrible, and we designed it deliberately to look really horrible, so we weren't distracted by kind of getting feedback about the UI, and we're more concerned with actually, with our client and the subject matter experts, really getting a feel for, does this feel like the real world? Because that was critical. If the outcomes of the decisions led to sort of a level of profitability you might expect in the real world, then we're along the right lines. So these are a couple of early screenshots from the data behind the simulation. And as you can see, what we've got here is 15 randomly generated customers who all have different attributes. So they have a range of maximum price they're willing to pay for the drink, and there's a range within that. They have a positivity level. You've got your bar staff, and they have an efficiency rating. We also later built in a happiness rating as well. And there was a point where if you didn't do well with your bar staff, they'd quit, and you'd have to employ a new one and train them from scratch. And then when every round ran, these things were actually happening. So this would cycle through, and individual customers are making individual decisions about whether they keep queuing, whether they give up queuing, whether they'll pay the price or not. And so the profit figure each team gets at the end of the month is actually based on kind of real world events that are happening in the simulation. As you can see here, this is a few rounds in, so some customers are feeling more positive because they're seeing the brand in the bar, they're seeing the advertising, and they're more willing to, the price that some customers are willing to pay is going up a bit. So over the course of 12 months, you can do various things to increase the amount people will pay, to recruit new customers with promotions. And after 12 months, the team who's made the most intelligent decisions would be the victors. So after we balanced the simulation out and we were happy with it, we then did a huge amount of play testing. So we put a very kind of basic front end on the game. We played it in real pilot sessions. This screenshot here is from a play testing session we did at Brightwave. And we created some detailed surveys using SurveyMonkey, which we asked everyone to fill in. We bribed them with free sandwiches, and there was an alcohol-based prize for the winners. And asked people for loads of feedback, really high-level stuff like, was it fun? Do you think you were able to form a strategy from the decisions you made? And down to sort of more detailed stuff, like what did you think about was this resource good value? Was this button in the right place? Did the UI make sense? So starting to get some real feedback from real users. And it wasn't until we'd really balanced it out over 7 or 8 different sessions that we then came back and we polished it off. And it's going to be launching quite soon. It hasn't quite finished yet. We're doing another testing session this week. So I'm delighted that all worked in the demo. And then we'll be going live with it. So why did we use a simulation? Just to kind of sum up on the retail simulation. We wanted it to be really simple. We wanted the game to be really simple to play and really fun to play so that teams would engage with it, especially after they've been through a whole day of kind of quite dense training. But behind that, there's really complex data. And as a result of which, there are almost limitless outcomes. It's pretty much impossible to play that game and get the same profit figure twice. You could the different nuances that you have with the different choices you make. So, for instance, some of those promotional items will last a whole year, whereas others would kind of expire after a couple of months. So some will continue to have an effect long into the game, and others will just tail off. So it's very hard to reproduce the same results. And one key thing is it encourages experimentation and replay. So teams who really wanted to go back and play over and over again. And you might make decisions in that game that you wouldn't dare make in the real world, like pricing your drink really high or just investing your budget just to kind of see what happens. So that's kind of it from us. Just to sum up, in terms of some of the key design principles that we've seen to work with simulations. The first is that shorter is better than longer. So in terms of people's attention span, because the decisions they're making in both of those simulations are quite kind of, they take a lot of thought. It's not just like a multiple choice question in an e-learning course. We're like, I'll go for that answer. There's a lot of discussion involved. So if the rounds were short, it was 5 minutes in the bar simulation. It wouldn't take any longer than sort of 10 minutes to play through the scenario. So we keep it short. Within that, we're giving really frequent feedback, which comes in a couple of different forms. One is that you see the immediate outcome of your actions, or at least sort of within a few months you see the outcome of your actions. And in the example Caroline showed, you get feedback from the other characters in the game. So you're being kind of helped along with the decisions you've made. The other thing I couldn't stress enough is to use a test and iterate and to allow the time to do that. So both of these solutions have been around a 6-month development cycle because we wanted to make sure that we built in getting real players to play it. You can't just ask a subject matter expert for feedback with these types of solutions. The only way you can test them is actually to have real players play them. Managing the competitive elements, this is an interesting one, especially with the game, the multi-team game, is that you can develop a game that's really good fun. But if that's all it is, then it's no use. And actually, some of the early versions, the feedback was, it was brilliant fun to play it, but we didn't really form a strategy. We didn't really learn much. We just wanted to win, and the team that won was really delighted. And then you ask, well, what strategy did you form? And they were like, oh, we don't know really. So we had to alter the design to make sure that the way that the facilitator ran it would actually bring out the learning point. So competition is great, but it's not a kind of means in and of itself. And then designing for replay, that's really linked to the first point with shorter being better than longer. We don't want something that's going to take someone half an hour to run through every time they do it. You want people to want to try again, to see what the different results are, to practice those behaviours that are dangerous to practice in a real world environment, because the outcomes could be dangerous. So that's it. We've come just to the end of our half-hour slot. If anyone's got any questions, happy to take any now. If we don't have much time, Brightwave stand is just around the corner there on stand 15. Caroline and I will be there immediately after this. So if you want to see any more of these simulations or ask us any questions about the design or development of them, then be our guests. Thank you very much.